The wrong bride. Late summer sunlight spilled across the Wyoming plains, gilding the endless grasses in a burning gold. Dust curled in small spirals around boots and wagon wheels at the Cheyenne Depot while the Union Pacific locomotive screeched and hissed as it ground to a halt. The air carried the sharp tang of smoke, hot iron, and the sweat of travelers pressed shoulder to shoulder. Ethan McGra stood tall at the platform's edge, hat pulled low against the glare, eyes narrowed in the practiced squint of a man used to watching horizons. At 35, he bore the lean hardness of frontier life, broad shoulders honed by fence posts and branding irons, sun-darkened skin, and calloused hands roughened from labor. Yet that morning he looked strangely unsettled. His boots shifted against the boards, his shirt collar sat too tight, and in one hand he clutched a small cluster of wildflowers he had picked by the creek before riding into town. He wasn't the sort of man who carried flowers. Then again, he had never been the sort to send for a wife either. He shifted his weight, scanning the windows as the train hissed. His heart pounded with an unfamiliar nervousness. Margaret. The name had circled his mind for months. Margaret Townsend of St. Louis, a 26-year-old widow, plain in appearance by her own admission, but steady in faith and household skills. In her letters, she had written about her choir, her protective brother, the meals she could prepare, and the mending she could manage. Ethan had read those letters by lamplight in his kitchen, the wind howling outside, and thought, yes, this is what I need. Not passion, not sparks. Companionship. A woman across the table, hymns in the evening, children someday to carry on the McGra land. He didn't want to die alone in the house his father had built with his bare hands. The steam hiss snapped him from his thoughts. Doors opened. Passengers spilled out. Merchants with trunks, families wrangling children, soldiers strutting in uniform. Ethan craned for a modest bonnet, a pale face framed in lace. Instead he saw her. She stepped carefully onto the platform, as though testing the boards beneath her shoes. A plain blue dress, wrinkled from travel but neat. A satchel light enough to carry easily. Black, glossy hair pinned at the nape caught the sun. Her delicate features were unlike anyone Ethan had ever seen. Straight brows, dark almond eyes, porcelain pale skin. For a moment he assumed she must be meant for someone else. Then her gaze swept the crowd until it landed on him. Relief lit her face. She hurried forward, clutched her satchel, and bowed her head. Mr. McGra? Her voice was soft, touched with an unfamiliar accent. Ethan blinked. That's me, he said, though his throat felt dry. She nodded, and before he could say more, she bent at the waist in a full bow right there on the platform. Heads turned to stare. Ethan stiffened, caught between confusion and embarrassment. My name Lin May, she said haltingly, hand pressed to her chest. I your wife. The flowers nearly slipped from his hand. Wife, he repeated stunned. No ma'am. There's been a mistake. Her brow furrowed. Lips moved as though trying to piece his words together. She shook her head slowly. No mistake. I come for you. For husband. Ethan swallowed hard. Margaret Townsend was supposed to be stepping off that train, a practical widow from St. Louis. Not this fragile-looking young woman with haunted eyes and a voice like chimes in the wind. Listen, miss, he said gently, lowering his tone. You've been misled. I didn't send for you. But she only tilted her head, confusion plain. I come. America. Cheyenne. McGra, she said, clinging to his name like it was the only thing anchoring her in this strange land. Orders barked, trunks thudded, children squealed. And there Ethan stood, flowers in hand, being claimed as a husband by someone who understood only fragments of what he said. He rubbed his jaw. What in blazes just happened? The wagon jolted over ruts as they headed back toward the ranch. Ethan guided the reins with practiced ease, the mare trotting steady. Beside him, Lin May sat stiff and upright, her satchel gripped tightly in both hands like a lifeline. Her wide eyes roamed the endless prairie, lips parted in awe. Or was it fear? Ethan kept stealing glances, trying to unravel her story. She looked too young, too far from home. Her dress was plain but neat, shoes worn thin. She knew only a handful of English words. Husband, wife, house, food. Each sounded rehearsed, memorized. He cleared his throat. So you came from where? San Francisco. She blinked, not understanding. He gestured east, then west. From where? Travel. She hesitated, then moved her hands side to side like waves. Ship. He nodded slowly. She had crossed the ocean. Lord above. His stomach nodded. Who had sent her? Some crooked agent, no doubt. He had heard the stories. Girls deceived with promises of husbands, only to be sold into brothels or worse. His jaw tightened. If Lin Mei had escaped that fate and landed here instead, maybe she was fortunate. He looked at her again. She sat with chin lifted, back straight, eyes darting as though memorizing the vast plains. Fragile, yes, but there was steel in the way she endured the jolting ride without a word of complaint. You can stay for now, he muttered more to himself than to her, pointing toward the horizon where his ranch house rose faint against the hills. Safe there, until I sort this out. She caught the word safe. Her whole expression softened, and she pressed her hand to her chest. Safe, she repeated carefully. The sound struck him harder than he expected. He swallowed, flicked the reins and drove on. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun hung low, painting the fields in bronze. The big house stood stubborn against the years, weathered boards against the sky. Beyond stretched the barn and corrals, cattle lowing for feed. A few hired hands paused, staring at the stranger Ethan had brought home. He helped her down from the wagon. She was lighter than he'd imagined, her small hand lost in his rough palm. She looked up at the house with awe and hesitation. Inside, the air carried wood smoke and leather. Lin Mei stepped slowly over the threshold, eyes taking in the stone hearth, the furniture, the stairs. She touched the table as if testing whether it was real. This will be your place for now, Ethan said, setting down her satchel. He felt clumsy, awkward, like a man trying to gentle a wild foal without knowing how. You'll be safe here. I'll find out what really happened. She gave a small nod, though it was obvious she only grasped bits of what he said. Then, unexpectedly, she let out the faintest smile. Hesitant, uncertain. Yet it brightened the dim kitchen more than the fire ever could. Ethan turned away quickly, his heart pounding with confusion. He had been waiting for Margaret Townsend. Instead, fate had sent him Lin Mei, a stranger in this land, in this language, yet one who believed herself his bride. And though he told himself it was all a mistake, deep down he already knew. The silence of his ranch would never sound the same. A new tongue of the heart had entered his world. That year, autumn reached Wyoming early. Frost whispered at night even before September drew to a close. The McGRA ranch continued its rhythm. Cattle bawling at dawn, horses stomping in the stalls, men cursing fences that refused to hold. But inside the ranch house, life shifted in ways Ethan could hardly take in. Lin Mei, her very name, lodged in his thoughts like a tune he couldn't stop humming. Those first weeks stumbled along awkwardly, a daily dance of missed meanings. She would point at the kettle, say water, and repeat it again and again until sure she had it right. Ethan would gesture toward the window, the table, the door, naming things as though he were raising a child. But Lin Mei was no child. The way her eyes fixed on the words carried a determination that matched any ranch hand he had ever known. Each evening, once chores and supper were done, she sat beneath the lamp with scraps of paper, practicing letters. Her hands steady, her strokes careful, though clumsy at first. Ethan watched her brow crease as she whispered sounds under her breath. Sometimes he corrected her gently, his voice low in the still kitchen. She would glance up, meet his eyes, and smile when the word finally came out right. That smile, small as it was, stole his breath every time. The first time she cooked, Ethan nearly broke. He had grown used to his own rough meals, beans, bacon, bitter coffee, bread so hard it could crack a tooth. But one morning he woke to the smell of something rich and warm drifting through the house. Lin Mei stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, hair pinned back, kneading dough with calm, practiced hands. When he entered, she looked up, cheeks flushed from the heat. Bread, she said, pointing, and with a triumphant grin, lifted the golden loaf from the oven. Ethan sat at the table, staring as steam curled off the crust. She cut a slice, set it before him and waited. He bit into it, soft, fragrant, alive with flavor. For a moment he forgot to breathe. Good, he managed, his voice rough. Real good. Her face lit with pride. She pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, home. Ethan froze, something inside him shifting. He hadn't thought of this house as a home in years, just walls and a roof, a place to eat and sleep between long days of work. But hearing her call it home, in that careful voice, made him see it differently. The ranch hands weren't sure what to make of her at first. They eyed her with suspicion, whispering about the China woman who had suddenly appeared in their boss's house. But Lin Mei had a way of proving herself without words. She stitched torn shirts with fine, neat hands. She brewed teas that eased raw throats. When one man tore his palm on barbed wire, she cleaned and bound it with calm steadiness, her touch as gentle as rain. She ain't like the ones I seen in Cheyenne, one hand muttered. Got backbone, that one. Slowly, suspicion gave way to respect. Yet not all shadows lifted. One evening, Ethan came home from mending fence to find Lin Mei standing at the window, a slip of paper in her grasp. She hadn't heard him at first. Her shoulders trembled, and when she turned, her cheeks were wet with quiet tears. Lin Mei, he said softly, stepping nearer. What's wrong? She shook her head quickly, brushing at her face. Nothing. The word bent by her accent, but her fingers clung tight to the paper. When he looked closer, he saw it was filled with flowing characters he could not read. Chinese, he guessed. Her lips quivered. She pressed the paper to her chest. Far, she whispered. Family far. The despair in her gaze cut through him. Ethan had carried loneliness all his life, but never the weight of being cast out. He understood then that she had left not only her home and land, but her kin, family who might never look upon her face again. Without thinking, he set his rough hand over hers. I'm sorry, he murmured. He doubted she grasped the words, yet she seemed to feel their intent. For a fleeting moment, she leaned against him, light as a sparrow. It was the first time she had allowed herself such closeness. And Ethan, who had sworn this union was nothing but a mistake, felt something shift within his chest, undeniable and real. The storm arrived in October, a wall of black rolling across the plains, the wind shrieking like tortured spirits. The cattle huddled low in the fields, the barn shook, and the house quaked as lightning split the sky. Ethan fastened the shutters, fed extra wood to the fire, and made sure Lin Mei had blankets at hand. She sat near the hearth, eyes wide as thunder rattled the very walls. When the lamp guttered, she whispered in her own language, quick and urgent, like prayer. Ethan crouched beside her. It'll pass, he told her, though his own chest felt tight with unease. Just a storm. She searched his face, testing his calm against the roar outside. Then, with careful slowness, she reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold, faintly trembling. You no regret? She asked, the words broken but clear. Ethan went still. Rain hammered the roof, wind screamed through the eaves, and lightning flared, catching her eyes like fire. No regret? She was asking if he rued her presence, if she was a burden, a mistake. His mind went to the empty house before she came, to the silence heavier than stone. He thought of her rare, soft laughter, of warm bread on the table, of shirts mended with patient stitches, of the way she whispered the word home. No regret, he answered firmly, tightening his grip around her hand. Not anymore. Tears filled her eyes, but they carried a different weight this time. Her smile trembled luminous, and she breathed a single word. Husband. He ought to have corrected her, reminded her they weren't truly wed. Not by preacher, not by paper. But the truth was, in that instant, he had no wish to. When the skies cleared, the land gleamed fresh and new. Days shortened, frost etched silver across the mornings, and the cattle were moved to winter pasture. Ethan and Lin Mei worked side by side. He mending fences, she gathering eggs, both sharing supper at the same table each evening. Words came slowly, yet meaning arrived quicker. A glance, a touch, a quiet silence often spoke louder than speech. Ethan found himself waiting for her laughter, for the way she smoothed her hair in the morning, for the quiet strength she bore like a banner. One evening, as snowflakes drifted softly past the window, he watched her hum while setting the table, her voice gentle as spring water. She caught him watching, her cheeks coloring, and for the first time, she spoke without faltering. Home, she said again, eyes locked on his, and Ethan knew it was true. The bride he had once expected never came. But the woman who did, afraid, voiceless, determined, had become more than a guest or a mistake. She had become his partner, his wife in every way but name. For the first time, Ethan McGra felt the ranch was more than land and cattle. It had come alive. It was whole. For in that house upon the Wyoming plains, two strangers had built a bridge between worlds. And on that bridge, they had found each other.